Billiken fans, welcome back. It's Zach Miller and Peter Hale. It's the Midtown Madness Podcast. Before we get going, thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It's season 4. Once again, the Midtown Madness Podcast is brought to you by Two Men in a Garden. Pete, I tell you what, I walked into the grocery store this week. I picked up a jar of a competitor. Well, maybe not a competitor, but a local company that, they had a new product out, and I sent you a photo of it. And you were like, I'm intrigued. I said it down. I felt too dirty. So I set it down. I kept the chips in my hand. I went over and I grabbed that Two Men in a Garden medium salsa. I got it home. It's sitting in the fridge. Well, actually, it's not in the fridge. Well, it is in the fridge. Fridge broke, but that's not a point. It is waiting for me to give it a little pulse in the Ninja. I'm just very excited about this, Pete. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is I'm excited about Two Men in a Garden salsa. It's local. It tastes amazing. They've got all the flavors to suit your individual salsa preferences. Whatever you're jonesing for, they got it. You can pick up their many products at any local grocery store or online at twomeninthegarden.com. Don't forget, summer is almost over. Still got time to enjoy those fruit flavor salsas. And you can get them at twomeninthegarden.com because, those local stores don't always have the really, those flavors. Follow them on social media at Two Men Salsa on Instagram and Twitter. Pete, this episode is going to be a little disjointed.
Yeah, it is, Zach, but I think the journey is really going to be fun for people. I like the way it will all come together. Yeah.
Yeah. So this week we have an interview. We have a guest. I won't say an interview, a guest, Matt Rocchio. You'll know him from Two Man Game with Bob Ramsey, among other media endeavors. He's on 101 ESPN, but we talked to him a little bit. We talked to him about the open practice where I got to meet him for the first time. We talked Travis Ford. Well, we talked about his impressions of the 2024-25 St. Louis University Billikens from that open practice. And Pete, you can attest to this. The man knows his hoops, and he just broke it all down for us.
Not just hoops, but soccer too. I think for my money, he's probably the best X's and O's mind in the local sports media. He just really gets it. He is a ball knower, Zach.
Yes.
He's a two-sport threat, even into some other sports as well. But those are the two main ones. And if you're like us, if basketball and soccer are kind of your main two things, he's an essential follow on X or Twitter at ROCC Rock ESPN, ROCC ESPN. He's great. He really knows how to break things down. He's got a really good eye for what's happening in a game. And as we get into in the interview, I think he's very much of sort of the same mentality as a lot of our new staff at the SLU men's basketball program. So that's going to make this next period of SLU basketball really fun to follow along with him. And yeah, I had a great time talking to him.
Yeah, we talked about the open practice. Then we actually got into the release of Travis Ford's salary compensation from SLU from the last year. And then we got into the U.S. Olympic men's soccer team and the goalkeeper, Patrick Schulte. Of course, you know him from his time at St. Louis University. So we kind of got his take on how the group games went. And then after that, we're going to get into, of course, our normal Billiken basketball talk, and then some of the other sports as well. So, it's going to be great. We'll get over that interview right now. Billiken fans, I'm excited to welcome on a very cool guest, a guy who has kind of carved his own space in Billiken Twitter, I think. He is a co-host of Two Man Game podcast with Bob Ramsey, who you'll know as the voice of the Billikens on 101. He's the producer of the opening drive on 101 ESPN. He also does color commentary for the St. Louis Ambush indoor soccer team. It's Matt Rocchio. Matt, welcome to the pod, man. How are you doing?
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for having me so much. Big fan. Obviously, love anytime that I can talk some Billiken. So thanks for having me on.
How much do you know about Billiken Twitter? I mentioned you kind of carved out a niche for covering the Bills in the Billiken Twitter sphere. How much do you pay attention to the insanity?
I will phrase it this way. I have the only way I've gone to the forums is that I've clicked on a few links on Twitter that have then led me to the forums that I've then kind of dipped my toe into that part of Billiken's Twitter. So that's about how deep I am. I think Billiken's Twitter is just a fantastic group of people out there and really just an incredible skill at snuffing out burners and things like that. And that always makes it a really fun, watch around Billiken's Twitter. So that's been most of my experience, especially over the last 12 months or so.
Yeah, well, welcome to the party. Although we think most of those burners are pretty much one person.
Yeah,
so yeah.
But it makes it fun. I mean, you're doing a little detective work. You're watching some basketball.
Yeah,
it's a great little flip around.
Sure.
So we have an employer in common. Well, my former employer and your current, I guess, employer, the St. Louis Ambush. You're a big soccer guy,
yep.
And you really have gotten into St. Louis City. And we talked with Justin Graham of Ball Watching STL last week. I just kind of want to get your take. How much fun have you had watching Johnny Klein emerge with the City first team, and then obviously seeing Simon Betcher back in St. Louis?
Man, I mean, Johnny Klein has been such a revelation for City. He's been incredible. He was tearing it up for City too. And my favorite part about soccer, as someone who wasn't as much of a soccer, player as you'd expect from a St. Louis kid when I was a little kid, I got into it much later. And so to come to it later, I love the idea of local kids and local products being able to work themselves through the academy program. And obviously we didn't have that until St. Louis City got here. And so to get a guy like Johnny Klein and get him into the system still, I thought that was incredible. And then he obviously steps up, scores his first MLS goal. And for me, I've loved the pressing element of St. Louis City since the get-go. I was big on needing to play an attacking brand of soccer when City hit the ground running here because, you gotta grab those non-soccer fans even in a soccer-heavy city like St. Louis. And Johnny Klein is a perfect player for that system, and you've seen it from every way. He's playing up in the attack. Obviously, Coach Hackworth, if you heard his comments post-game, loves John Klein. He's been talking about the different ways he's been wanting to play him ever since he got in front of there. We saw him play kind of that in the hole false nine that he played at SLU. He had a lot of success there. Recently, we've seen him play out wide at left wing back. So that just shows you how skilled Johnny Klein III really is. And then you add in a guy like Simon Betcher. We only seen one game from him, and he was obviously on short rest, having to come over on the loan. But man, he was pressing like crazy in that Leagues Cup match, and he looks like he's going to be a perfect fit. I love all the St. Louis, kind of flavor we can get on this team. I just wish they could have actually come in, a year before. Maybe Patrick Schulte would be the goaltender. I'm happy with Berkey, but again, I'm okay with all kinds of Billiken flavor on the roster. It looks great right now.
You worry about.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, what do you think Klein and Betcher might have? Will their opportunities be kind of short lived with guys getting healthy or more players getting signed recently?
Yeah, I mean, Johnny Klein III, I think he's going to see a reduction in the playing time because a lot of older players weren't stepping up, and he got that time. Injuries obviously contributed to that with a guy like João Klaus. And so now when you get Cedric Toyshirt, you get Marcel Hartle. I mean, those guys are taking up the spots where Johnny Klein III was playing. So I think that left wingback thing I mentioned, that's interesting because it seems like John Hackworth might be wanting to play a little bit more of a back five, a back three than we saw previously. And so is Johnny Klein still in that conversation? They recently got a guy who kind of slots in at left back. So I'm not really sure where Johnny Klein's chances are going to come from right now. Betcher, I think, they brought him in to be the punch off the bench for this new attack. Toyshirt, Hartle, those guys are going to be getting a lot of the starts. I think Betcher is going to get some starts, especially if João Klaus is still out for another week or two right now. So Betcher will get those starts, but once everyone's healthy, I think you look at him as kind of your guy that comes in the 65th minute and breaks down defenses that are kind of already a little bit tired on their back foot, which I know players, probably don't like that because they want to be a starter. But at the same time, that could be a good role for him to come in. And with the way he presses, he can get some easy goals.
Matt, so you kind of showed up into the Billiken Twitter sphere, and I got to admit, there is a long running history, like we kind of talked about before, about people showing up into the Twitterverse and or the message boards and kind of being, covering the team. And you're like, it's that local flavor. We always feel like the St. Louis media has it out for the Billikens. We did forever. But so eventually we got to meet actually at the SLU Men's Basketball Open practice. So I'd followed you and been wary of you. And then I finally realized, you're doing great work in all of this. And I finally get to meet you at the open practice. I got to get your just overall, elevator pitch. What gets you excited about this basketball team after that open practice?
That open practice certainly got me more excited, but I would say I was excited before that. And I think a lot of SLU fans were, because I went back and you can pretty much watch the Sycamores. Indiana State Sycamores. You can watch their entire conference tournament and NCAA tournament run on YouTube pretty easily. And so that was the first thing I did as soon as the Josh Schulte name started getting thrown around. And as soon as he was hired, I dove full into every single piece of Indiana State tape I could find. And that alone got me pretty excited, because if you follow my Twitter, you'll know that, the one thing I'm looking at when it comes to SLU basketball, and frankly with St. Louis City as well, is I want to know what's happening out there on the court, why it's happening. So I'm going to ask X's and O's questions, and Ford sometimes wouldn't like my questions because he'd be like, well, I got to coach against this team in 2 months, so let's not talk about that. And that's a fair thing. It means I'm asking the right question, so I'm okay with it. So that's all I want to know about. And so just watching Josh Schultz's offense got me excited. And then to see it put into practice in just, the skeleton 10% form that we saw from that free practice, that kind of rejuvenated it again, because Robbie Avila wasn't very much involved in that practice, which I'm fine with. We know what his game is. Watching guys like Isaiah Swope, though, up close and personal, a healthy Isaiah Swope, because he was, that's the one thing you're not going to see in that available Indiana State, games, is that Isaiah Swope wasn't healthy in that back end of the run for Indiana State last year. And so you turn on the tape there, and then you watch him in person, and the stop and start, the suddenness, his ability to just leave defenders in his wake is at already a completely different level. And that kind of player jumps off the screen when you see him in person as opposed to on the screen. And I didn't think he was going to jump out the way he did. And then watching him in warmups, so sudden, so clean, the dribble's tight, it's low to the ground. It is 100% an NBA level dribble. He's got an NBA level step back shot. He just doesn't have NBA level size, which I think is why, you didn't hear a lot about this kid until Indiana State started going in that run last year. So, just the Indiana State parts of this game have me so excited about being brought over. Then you add in a couple new names, like a guy like Kaluania. I had no idea what to expect from him. And then I'm seeing him in the beginning of the warm-ups of the practice. And the one issue I will have with the guy, he's got a little hitch in his shot. He starts every single shot he has below his waist, which is a weird thing. It's kind of the antithesis of Gibson Jimerson, who starts all his shots right here, and Anya's all the way down here below his waist. And then the guy goes out there and plays one of the most exciting games at the four that I've seen from a SLU player in the last 2 or 3 years. He was everywhere. He's picking and popping. He's taking threes. He's running the floor and dunking. He actually put away a dunk off off the backboard pass from Isaiah Swope in transition. He was incredible. So you combine what we know is going to come here with Schurtz and his guys, combine some of the new guys, and then combine the fact that the SLU players already look better. Larry Hughes' shot continues to look even better. I think he might be a legitimate 6'5" right now. They have Kellen Thames went from being listed on the SLU website at 205 to 210. They are undercutting the weight gain from Kellen Thames this summer, and it's a good weight gain. He looks freaking huge. He's starting to look like his dad out there. He's filling out that full 6'9" frame. It's incredible. And then Gibson Jimerson. The way I put it in the tweet during the practice, I think might be the best way I've ever described his shot, and I'm going to continue using it, which is if you put a pass in his pocket where he doesn't actually have to move the ball at all, it's like starting a bullet at the end of a barrel for a gun. It's already out. And so Gibson Jimerson's gotten better. Everyone's gotten better. And so when you combine all of that, I don't know how you wouldn't be excited as a St. Louis basketball fan right now.
For sure. I mean, like I think you kind of went even more in depth than a lot of what Zach and I had touched on in our, recap of that practice and everything.
That's why we needed you last week, man.
Sorry about that, guys.
I'm wondering, what do you think Jimerson's ceiling is in this offense? One of the things we said is it almost feels like watching him in the first, period of that open scrimmage, where I think he had something like 11 points almost immediately. I told Zach, I was like, I don't know if we've seen him play to his potential at all in the past 5 seasons at SLU. We might only really be seeing the beginning of what he can do. Yeah.
So if you look at Gibson's best season, just statistically, if you want to talk about it, the last 3 years, he's pretty much taken 12 shots per game. And that hasn't moved. His efficiency's moved, and that's why his points has fluctuated from the career high 16.3 a few years ago to the 14 and 13 over the last couple of years. And we all know why the efficiency's gotten pulled down a little bit with the team around him at times. So when you look at those numbers, I think Josh Schertz is very good at finding shots for the players that he wants. And I think he's good at getting the players that need to get the ball in right places. And I think one of the biggest things I saw in that practice that kind of jumped out to me was they set up a perfect hammer play, which is you set a pick at the top of the screen, and the player runs across the pick, and you throw a little skip pass pretty much just over the top of the defense and get it a quick 3-pointer. And they ran that with Isaiah Swope. And the very next play, they run the exact same setup, but this time they have a counter where they overplay the Isaiah Swope hammer play, and then they have Gibson on the exact same backdoor that we saw for multiple years with Yuri Collins. I mean, it was picture perfect. It was like Yuri Collins had stepped onto the floor for a quick play. And so watching them find the plays for Gibson that we know he's good at, seeing his shot as quick as it was, seeing that he has players who know to get him the ball in that pocket so he can immediately shoot it, I think there's no reason not to expect his just raw field goal numbers to get to to get to a little bit higher, around 13 and 14. And then you look at his efficiency numbers, there's no reason to think in this offense he's not back up to being a 42% three-point shooter. And so I think, again, you're looking at a guy who combine volume with increased efficiency in this kind of offense. There's no reason that Gibson Jimerson isn't upwards of 13 or 14 shots per game and isn't more around maybe a career high of 17 and a half. That's right now where I'm putting him, because he just fits so perfectly in this offense. And I just think getting your shooter shots is a tricky thing at times in offenses. And I think there's some guys who, the way they build it, and I think the way he had that play set for Swope and the counter built into it, that is a very, very simplistic but very good way to look at Schertz's, offense in a vacuum. And it's a very simplistic way to describe it. Now, a lot of basketballs like this, but I mean, it's just show them one thing and then do 8 things from that one thing that you're showing them. And that's why Schertz is so much fun to watch. And I think guys like Gibson Jimerson feast in those kind of offenses. So there's no reason to not expect him to have a career year in his final year in college basketball. And again, I think it becomes a factor when you're 24 years old and not 21 anymore. I mean, that's a big thing when you're playing in the college game and you are a more of a grown man than some of the guys that are out there. That's a factor, and that's going to play into it for Gibson, especially when it comes to things like his passing and his finishing at the rim.
2 other guys came in, and Zach and I didn't have the greatest sense of what they did after this open practice, but I'm wondering if you either know more about them coming in or just what you saw the other night. And that's Casey and Johnson, AJ Casey, Kobe Johnson, coming from Miami and West Virginia, respectively. Much different players, but anything you saw out of them and how you might see how they fit into this offense?
Kobe Johnson just seems like a perfect glue guy. Like he doesn't stand out, but I don't want to say that in a bad way. It's just he's in the right spot every time. He spots up well. He has a feel for the offense. He's one of those guys where the littlest things in the scrimmage were jumping out to me, which is just a guy drives and he moves from below the break to above the break, and it's the perfect spot to just be there for the kick out pass. It's little things like that to show that Kobe Johnson has a very good natural feel for offense. And you need a guy when Gibson's not out there to be taking those open shots that the offense is creating. And, he's a senior, so he's a guy who he's got that same feel for the offense, and he's got a dialed-in shot. And so I think Kobe Johnson's going to be a fantastic depth player behind Gibson at the 2. AJ Casey is going to be fascinating to me because he has a little bit of the thing that Anya had, where he's got a little bit of a hitch in his shot where he's bringing it down from too low, but he's not as springy as Anya was, but he's a little bit thicker, I think, a little bit bigger. He's got a good natural stroke on the shot. He just needs to kind of fix that really, really long, elongated start that he has. But he's a sick athlete, and looking at his numbers, it's crazy that I think somebody tweeting out that he's like 1 for 23 in his career at 3-point shooting.
Right.
And again, you wouldn't know that from watching him in warmups. The natural stroke he's got puts a lot of good side spin on the ball and everything like that. So he's got a good natural release on it. So I think Casey could really fit in again as a depth guy at the 4th spot, giving you a little bit different than Anya. And I could be completely wrong because, and they both, I think, have a little bit of springiness that could give you some small ball 5. Again, Casey's a little thicker, so I think maybe he might be more liable to be a small ball 5. At the same time, there were 2 guys on the roster that weren't at the scrimmage. The 2 European boys, and those guys are both big guys too. Brockhoff is 6'9", 230. So that might be a factor in that 4-5 mix right now. But I like the idea of Casey and Anya being your 4s because, again, they can roll, they can pop, they can block shots on defense. They're quick enough to keep their feet moving in front of more mobile 4s. That's a good 4 group, especially for 2024, when you need guys who can run with 6'7", 200-pound guys, but also guys who can run with 6'9", 240-pound guys.
One guy, you talked about Kaluanya being he absolutely showed out, and I would say in any normal year, there would probably be only one guy, and it would be a runaway with Kaluanya, but another guy who came in and just absolutely you could not take your eyes off of was Josiah Dotzler. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, he's such a lefty guard, it hurts. Like everything about him, he just looks exactly like a lefty. Like if you flipped the image and made him play like he was a righty, like they do sometimes with left-handed quarterbacks on video, I would still just assume that the guy was a lefty because he just has that weird stop and start craftiness that lefties seem to always have in basketball. He's just prototypical. The way he drives the ball, it even has that weird lefty, like Manu Ginobili kind of esque way to it. And so that's another guy who I think is going to be a fantastic player off the bench. You were saying he was cutting all through the defense in a fantastic way. Big thing with a guy like Dotzler, this annoys me with guards who aren't usually like ball handlers or playmakers. He actually knows how to use a screen, which is something I think that we've watched some SLU players over the years not know when to wait for a guy to set the screen so they can actually create the contact that will then open up space on the drive. Dotzler was showing a lot of good patience to actually use the screen correctly, create the contact, and then open the space. He was fantastic. He was driving and kicking in a great way. I was really impressed from him, and I really like the spark that he's going to give for the Billikens off the bench.
I penciled him as a starter, my dude.
I just think that the 5, I mean, you're going to go, so you got Swope, Gibson, you're going to go with Avila, obviously, at the 5. And so that leaves you, and that probably Kalu, I was going to say, at the 4. And so, yeah, I mean, do you go with Kobe Johnson? Do you go with Kellen Thames? I think you're right. You're right. I think Dotzler could slide in there, yeah, as a starter. You're right. That's a really good point. I think Kobe Johnson, Dotzler. My thing here's why I'm thinking maybe Kobe Johnson actually might get more nods, or maybe even Kellen Thames, which is Isaiah Swope's under 6 feet tall. Gibson Jimerson's not the best defender. So maybe you get a guy like Kobe Johnson, 6'4", 200 pounds, who's more of a, hey, let's go guard the opposing best wing, and we'll hide Isaiah on a shooter or a non-shooter, and we'll get Gibson away from a guy who's too quick-footed. So that would be, I think, the thought process on who slots in as that 5th guy in the roster around Avila, Swope, Gibson, and then let's say Anya. I think you got to look at maybe a defensive wing.
I want to circle back. Hold on, Pete. I want to circle back on Thames before I forget, because you mentioned that 6'9" frame and filling that out with muscle. does his kind of play style or role change from what we saw of him last season?
I don't think so. And again, I think that'll actually be a perfect fit for this SLU team, because you get him as a swing forward, because he's a little bit bigger. So you're now more confident playing him against bigger fours, but he's still a freak athlete. So you're fine with him playing against other threes. The big thing for him is, he's hunting offensive rebounds. He's still doing that. He's got an incredible, sense for where the ball's coming off the hoop, and when's the right time to time those offensive rebounds and try to get those putbacks. I think that's going to be a big part of his game. Obviously, when it comes to a guy like Kellen Thames, the big question is going to be, we know what you can do in the dunker spot. We know what you can do playing off the ball. What does your shot look like? What does your shot selection look like? That kind of thing. And that's going to be the thing that's still up in the air for Kellen Thames. But right now, I think you just need him to continue to be an energy guy and then finish off those more set play finishes. Hit your open threes, hit that backdoor cutter,
that 45.
Develop maybe what we can see if he develops a little bit of a floater game. I think that'd be really nice, because what are defenders going to do if that's what he's going to, as kind of like a secondary move in his bag on the drive? Obviously, this team's going to get out and run. Kellen Thames is going to be huge in that. You get Anya going down the left side, you get Kellen Thames down the right, and you got Swope with the ball up the middle against only two defenders. Feel like SLU should be walking away with 2 easy points pretty much on that play pretty much every time. And Thames is going to be a big part of that. Him filling out that frame is huge, because he throws his body throughout the court like he's Gerald Wallace, and I love that. But sometimes you wondered how much that would work with him being a little bit lankier. Now he's filling out the frame. He looks thicker. When he comes to crash in on some of those boards, instead of being the guy taking the hit and taking the bruises, he's going to be giving them out this year, and that's going to be interesting.
I wanted to get your first impressions on Amari McCoughtry. I think of all the incoming freshmen, he's probably the one that SLU fans have kind of penciled in as the one with the chance for the most minutes right away.
Yeah, and I think that may go back to our defensive guard conversation. 6'6", 205 is what they list him as. I don't know if he's 6'5", or even I don't know if he's 6'6". I'm already being a truther about some of the listed heights because the players were standing next to each other. I was like, okay, we got to start doing some math here. Let's find our baseline. By the way, Gibson is the perfect baseline. I think everyone's being very honest about Gibson's height. He's been there long enough that we would have figured out if somebody was lying about that. Gibson's my baseline, and I try to base it everywhere off from there. So I don't know if McCoughtry is actually 6'6", but he's got great size. A defensive guard would be a fantastic role for him this year, because getting back to just watching things in practice, they have a lot of work to do on his shot, and he was getting noticeably frustrated with the fact that nothing was falling in warm-ups before the practice. I mean, noticeably frustrated, and he's the guy where he's a good basketball player. A lot of the threes are falling, but there's no consistency in where they're going. There's no consistency in the shot. His elbows here. It's moving around. He's short-arming his release. He's pushing it at the top. I mean, he's just doing a lot of very stereotypical things that you see young shooters do when they've never had to work with a guy specifically just on their shot. So when you have a guy like Gibson who has gotten his shot higher and quicker year after year after year after year, that tells me that the SLU fans aren't going to have to wait too long until McCoughtry starts working on that shot and getting rid of those little things, gets his elbow in the right spot, starts following through consistently. It's not a hard fix, but there are definitely big things that need to be fixed. And so right now, my big question for him is, where is he as a shooter? But overall, I mean, he's a hard-nosed player who's going to get stuck in there. He had an incredible, he was a great rebounder as a high school player. And so I think when you think about a guy who comes in maybe as number 10 on your roster coming off the bench, as a defensive guy who can get you points in transition, that I think would be a great role for him right out of the gate as a freshman. But there's definitely some questions around his shot right now.
Yeah. Have you had much of a chance to get to interact with any of the coaching staff yet? These seem like guys who would really, I don't know, have a lot in common with you. They're real nerds when it comes to, breaking down video and designing offenses. And it just seems like you could chop it up with these guys all night.
Yes, and it's funny you say that because that's exactly what happened after the scrimmage. Zach Boysford, who's one of the assistant coaches for Josh Schertz, who was with him at he was at George Washington for a while, and he was with him at Indiana State. And I saw him and watching him on Twitter with the way he reacts to he was at Indiana State and then he was at George Washington. My apologies, I screwed up the timeline there. So watching him on Twitter and seeing him interact with a lot of fans over the last year, I've already been kind of a fan of his. And then obviously knowing what he has been as an X's and O's guy on Church's staff before, I was immediately fascinated by him. And so he was over right near the area where I was sitting. And so I was able to get a chance to talk to him. And it's funny you say basketball nerds, because I explained to him, I work at 101 ESPN, and I kind of explained to him how I'm, a South City, St. Louis kid, I never got into soccer and baseball the way everyone wanted me to, and I became a very big basketball and football fan. And eventually it turned into nerddom because I wasn't a very good player, and I wanted to be around the game. And he's like, "Hey man, that's all we are. We're a bunch of basketball nerds." So that's exactly what Coach Boysford said. And so I'm Boysford, excuse me. So I'm super excited about getting the chance to talk to him, getting a chance to talk to Coach Schertz, because 100%, I was talking about it earlier, I do think that there's a chance that we're going to get a lot of great things out of this coaching staff, and the insight that I know fans really want to hear about what's happening on the court. I think this coaching staff's going to be very open, very in-depth, because I don't think they can help it. And I think that's how you know they are basketball nerds. Because if you ask them a good enough question, they will answer it in a very nerdy way. And that's how you know someone's a nerd. It's always like the Belichick thing for me. Like, you could ask Bill Belichick a question about the game that just happened. He will yell at you. But if you ask him the weirdest question about punting, or ask him about the score of the Navy lacrosse game, the guy will talk for 12 minutes because he's a nerd about those things. And so I think there's a chance for a lot of really fun conversations with Coach Schertz, with Coach Bovair, with a lot of this coaching staff. I hope to have it, I hope me and Rammer can get those guys on, because I'm very excited just for, again, not just for the offense they run, but to break down the offense they run with them. That's something I've been excited about since the day this was announced.
Yeah, us too. We're hoping we can get him on too.
He's so awesome. I mean, right out of the gate, he was friendly. Again, he wanted to know about me, how I became a basketball fan, and right out of the gate, he was like, "Hey, man, message me on, DM me on Twitter." And so, he's awesome. Schertz seems like a great guy. I haven't got to interview him and talk to him yet personally, but we had him on the opening drive on 101 ESPN twice already. We had him on right after he was signed. Or joined St. Louis, and then we had him on after they closed out the roster additions, and we were able to finally talk about some of the players that we knew that they were going to be adding, all those Indiana State guys and things like that. So talking to Schertz, I'm really excited and can't wait to get a chance to really start interviewing him and talking to him.
I feel like me, he talks too much to be full of shit.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I talk so long that you just realize that it's real, and yeah,
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, again, being a St. Louis guy, I always go back to references of past here, and for me, it's a guy like Tony La Russa. If you asked him a question, he might tear you up for it, but part of him tearing you up for it was him saying, "Listen, I know what I'm doing here." I know this team and I know this game better than you. And so I have no problem explaining to you my thought process for a decision, because I know my reasoning for it very well. And I know that you can punch holes in it all you want, and we're just going to get a good explanation. And I kind of feel that same way with Schertz, whereas he understands what his team's trying to do. And if you ask him a question about why didn't they do it, he's going to give you a very good explanation about, this was my thought process. Here's what was supposed to happen, and here's what happened. And I think you see that with coaches who are confident in their scheme. And I think Schertz, he emanates that. So
you mentioned good conversations, and a conversation that started this week on Twitter was initiated by Stu Durando, and it was his tweeting out the updated tax forms on Travis Ford's contract. If you don't mind getting in this, because we want to talk a bit about this, and then of course we'd love to have you recap the U.S. Olympic soccer as well. Awesome. So Stu tweeted out updated tax form, And this was West Pine Bill's Christmas, by the way. I just want to shout them out.
100%.
On Thursday, Stu tweeted out, updated tax forms show that Travis Ford made $2,671,797 for the 22-23 season. His next to last year at SLU. Also, $49,716 in additional compensation. First of all, what do you think the additional compensation was for? Just guess. Just wild guess. Go ahead, because we're all just wild guessing.
So I'm gonna say it was connected to something tangible like season ticket sales.
My thing was 20 wins.
Yeah, 20 wins makes sense.
Because how many times Chris May mentioned 20 wins?
That's a good point.
Yeah. That's
actually, I think that might be the money guess. Yeah, the 20 wins thing. That's either recent. That's either just like the bias of that becoming like a oversized collar kind of level of inside joke on Billiken's Twitter, or that's absolutely, I think, the right answer. It's an interesting topic. I understand why. I get why it's a thing. I just think it's the oddest thing in the world for a fan base to care how much a coach is making. I understand maybe why you care in the overarching point of it all, because you want to look at the investment of your program and a coach, but to use it as a talking point as like a game by game thing I think is a weird thing.
It's
for
crazy.
A fan base to do.
It's awesome.
Because it's just like, yeah, okay, well, Chris May made that decision 4 years ago. And I don't think it's one that he evaluates every single game singularly. Like, well, I didn't like how Travis used the bench today. That wasn't the way that a $2.2 million coach uses the bench. I might have to fire him today. Like, I understand I understand that fans want that to be the thought process, but and again, the overarching criticism of it being an overpay in people's minds, that's fine. But the fact that it was a weekly topic that was brought up as, oh, this is what a $2.5 million coach does with 3 minutes left in the second half, huh? It was the weirdest thing in the world to me. But there's a point where I understand it, because it's a something to lean on as you're not actually criticizing that. You're criticizing the overarching fact of everything that's happened over the last 2.5-3 years. I get that. I know that there's context in the comment, but it still fascinates me nonetheless.
Well, my favorite thing was comparing the coaches we lost to and their salaries too. That's how I approached it.
And again, that one's fascinating to me, because it's just like, yeah, you're just dunking on the rest of A10 for saying SLU has more money than them. Like, it's just like, that's essentially what the point was. It was just like, hey, A10, by the way, have fun. We might suck this year, but we will pay a coach more next year. And so have fun right now. Like, that's essentially what the comment came down to, if you were thinking about it deeply. It's fine.
I was not thinking about it deeply. Nothing I do, I think about deeply.
No, and that's the fun part about being a fan. The expectation is that you're going to react. That's why the business model works.
We used around $2.5 million figure. I think that Pete, you kind of used this more than I did.
Yeah. The question was really years. Like, how many years did he have left? Because we had heard different things there, and in terms of like when it had been renewed, because this athletic department keeps it very close to the vest in terms of what they do. Like, a lot of even private schools will say, hey, we just extended our coach through this year. Mm-hmm. SLU never did that, or never does that. And so that's been kind of frustrating for us, when things aren't going like you want.
The rolling renewal, I think that was something that I understand 100% why that news really bothered SLU fans. Because as a guy, because I went to Mizzou, and so Mizzou was dealing with that with Conzo Martin, where it was okay. When does this contract get down to 2 years so that they can fire him and it's not as big of as a problem? Well, it's like, well, the contract doesn't get down to 2 years. It's pretty much, as long as he hits these very low bars, it's pretty much always a 4-year contract, and so you have to deal with that fact. And so I understood the issue with SLU fans in that aspect of the contract. That part is undeniably annoying, because you do get to this sense of mediocrity at times in college sports where things become okay. And I think it's worse in football because for a while there, you had, again, with the Mizzou Tigers, you had the idea of, well, let's just go to a bowl game. So let's finish 6-6. All right, 500. Jesus, can we have a little bit higher of a level here? So I think there's fear of stagnation at times in college sports. So I understand that perspective of it from fans.
What do you think so between the two tweets, in Travis Ford, West Pine Bills tweeted out this whole big spreadsheet. They're nerds about this stuff. We all know it. Yep. In Travis Ford's second to last season at SLU, he received a 9.86% increase in total compensation, remained the highest paid coach in the A10. And in the 2023-24 990 will show a large increase to Travis Ford, and total compensation won't break out salary versus buyout. What do you think that number is going to look like?
Oh, that's a good question. I was told there wouldn't be math. That's yeah.
I don't do math. I expect other people to do math.
That's I don't get into the salary math very often when it comes to the coach contract, because again, I have this is numbers that were thrown in front of me.
There's girl math, there's boy math, and there's college sports math.
That's a good question. I actually, you know what? I'm gonna have to. I have somebody I can ask who.
Are you phoning a friend?
No, they won't know the answer directly, but they'll have a much better guess than I will. And I'll try to get that out on Twitter for you, and tag you in it, because I'm actually now fascinated by this. I now have a couple of questions for a friend of mine that I'm going to ask, because that's something I'm not good at actually at guessing at, because there's a couple things that I know are going to factor in, but I don't know how they're going to factor in. And so,
I mean, you wonder whether or not, I feel like we're going to find out if, say, they took a smaller, like they mediated a smaller buyout of some kind, or if SLU paid out what adds up to be the full value.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a safe bet that they probably had to buy, that the buyout was probably the majority of a 3-year scale is probably what I would guess at, just because when you have that rolling renewal like that, I think it kind of gives you some leverage, because the contracts are always there. And so I don't think they were able to get out of the buyout very easily. At the same time, I don't think Travis Ford is planning on being on the sidelines of college basketball for very long. So when you think about that factor, I don't know how, was he really being that stingy about, the full buyout? I'm not sure. I would expect that, people sign contracts, they want to get paid their money. So yeah. And I don't blame them. You sign a contract that says I'm paid through this date, and they agree to that. It adds on a new year every year. So it's still technically a 3/4 year deal. Well, let's pay me out those 3 years. I think that's a fair expectation. Again, fans might not like it, and I understand the connection of a private school and people who went there and it being their money, but sometimes you don't get to say.
I kind of want to switch gears over to Patrick Schulte and the U.S. Olympic soccer team. How fucking cool is this?
I love it so much. That's why I was so angry in that first game, when I'm like, okay, U23s, I get this. And then freaking like 29-year-old Alexandria Lacazette, I'm like, okay, I thought this was a U23 tournament, and I know you have two or three overage spots. I understand that, but I was pissed when he's the one breaking down the United States defense in the second half of that first game when they lose to France. I'm like, my boy Patrick's getting murdered out here because they got a freaking League One All-Star, or League All-Star out here cutting up the U23 defense. This is BS. I was very angry about that. I'm glad they took out their anger on New Zealand.
He's like the guy they bring in and what was it, Benchwarmers? I am 13.
Exactly. I was like, I understood the rules, but I was still very angry about that. At the same time, I think the United States has had at least one goal scored by one of their overage players as well. So it was obviously good to see Jordy Mihailovic, score that goal against New Zealand, first Olympic goal for United States men's soccer team in a long time there. And obviously then getting the 4-1 win there, then beating up on Guinea. Again, another goal by Jordy Mihailovic. Paredes looked like an absolute stud out there. That's fantastic. I love seeing them succeed. And obviously, anytime we can see Patrick Schulte have some success, that's been fantastic. He's been unfreaking believable since he got really thrust into the lineup up there in Columbus in last year in the middle of the year, and now they go on that Champions Cup run. Yeah, they go on that Champions Cup run. They obviously go on the MLS Cup run. They're obviously one of the top teams this year. He's been on an incredible run, and obviously getting that time with the United States. I hope he has fun. Hopefully, on one of the podcasts I do over at 101 with Moon Valjean of the Riz Show is Soccer 101, and it's looking like we're going to be able to talk to Patrick after he gets back from the Olympics. So I'm really excited about that conversation because I can't imagine what it's like to be 20, 22, 23. You have the whole world in front of you as an MLS goalkeeper. I'm sure the last 12 months have been crazy for him. And now you get to go, party up and hang out in Paris with the world's greatest athletes. So I can imagine he's having quite the last 12, 14 months for his life. And I imagine it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, but if you can't meet like a cute Australian surfer chick, what's the point? I got to go to Tahiti for that.
I would argue the point is the entire gymnastics.
That's true. You got a good point.
The top athletes in the world, we all hear the stories coming out of the Olympics. The number keeps getting bigger. So, have some fun.
I need a prediction right here, right now. Yes or no. Patrick Schulte is the U.S. national team goalie at the World Cup.
Ooh. I mean, yeah, I'm with it. I'll take it. I'm going to go with about I'll go with like a 60-70% chance on that one, just because again, he's on the best team in the United States over the last year. He continues to play well. He's obviously showing respect and getting respect to the United States men's national team. He played fantastic, even though again they got blitzkrieged by France. He was fantastic in the first half of that game. Again, you see a 3-0 scoreline, you're not going to want to throw a lot of plaudits at the goalie. I thought he was fantastic again until the second half. I didn't get to see much of the second half of the Guinea game, but I mean it's a 3-0 shutout, so I assume he played pretty well as well. So I mean he's playing hot. The thing is, Americans have a lot of good goalkeepers. I know some of that depth that was there going into last cycle has kind of spoiled in the cupboard a little bit, if you want to say. And so some of the young players that I think you would have been expecting to be that 24, 26-year-old in the conversation from, if not the starter, maybe the second goalie for the 2026 team. I think that Patrick Schulte has, if not entered the starters conversation, he's undoubtedly at the top of the list for the second goalkeeper on that roster right now, looking 2 years out.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's typically been a position of strength for the U.S. men's national program.
It's also been a particularly position of age. Great age.
Yeah, and Turner's still the number one, but I think beyond him, it's a big open field now, and there's no reason why if Schulte keeps it up and makes the right career moves and make sure he's still getting those reps, I don't see any reason why he can't slot in there.
And 23 months is a long time. Again, I mean, he was 23 months ago. Patrick Schulte wasn't even an MLS goalkeeper, let alone an MLS starter. And so a lot of things change in soccer in 23 months.
23 months ago, he was on our show.
Exactly. Right. Come
on. You know what? I mean, regarding Patrick Schulte and the national team, I mean, you look at the way this tournament's going. If the U.S. continues on that trajectory, who knows if Mitrovic is not the guy, right? You go ahead and say, hey, you won us an Olympic medal the first time. And I couldn't tell you if we'd ever won one, to be honest with you. But I mean, maybe Mitrovic is now looking at Schulte as the guy that helped bring him a bronze medal, and that moves on. But I'll tell you who has been gushing over Patrick Schulte, and that is our Lord and Savior, Tim Howard.
Yeah, and if Tim likes it, I'm down with it. And I know Tim's always been an advocate for the next kind of young goalkeeper coming up. I remember him. Was it Horvath that I remember him being a big fan of? Maybe it was who was the other young American keeper that came out a few years ago? I'm blanking on Zach Steffen. Maybe it was Steffen that he was a Steffen.
Johnson.
I think I remember him being a big fan of one of the young guys. So And like I said, kind of made a comment about some of the things spoiling the cupboard a little bit. Like you said, it's a position of age because some of the young guys haven't developed the way you wanted them to. And so, yeah, I'm with Tim Howard 100% of the way. Schulte's looks fantastic. And especially with goalkeepers, I mean, it's a position that naturally hits at peak at an older age. And so when you have a guy like him dominating at such a young age, it's hard to put a ceiling on it because you just don't see guys before age 27 really hit this level of being a top player in a league. And so it's going to be interesting to see exactly where that ceiling is for him. Obviously, the question is going to become, how often is, or how shortly does he become a target for European teams? And obviously a big time at the Olympics, maybe in 2 years, if he's still in the MLS and he is a big time at the World Cup, those could be the things that could propel him across the pond.
Well, Rock, this has been awesome. I got one last question for you. Favorite Billiken of all time? I've never asked this question. I don't know why I've never asked this question, but I'm asking it right now.
I think it's going to have to be Larry Hughes. Because for me, I went to CBC, and so obviously learning about Larry Hughes. And again, I wasn't a huge basketball fan, so I learned about Larry Hughes kind of like on the fly in like 7th, 8th grade, and then I ended up going to CBC. I become a huge fan of the NBA, and right out of the gate, he's on that LeBron 2006 Cavaliers team, and right out of it was like, okay, a St. Louis guy, a CBC kid is playing in the NBA. I'm running with this team. And so right out of the gate, when my NBA fandom really started when I was like 14, 15 years old in like 04, 05, 06, I was fascinated that a St. Louis kid had already made it. And so right out of the gate, it was Larry Hughes for me, more so from his NBA career because I wasn't watching his SLU career. But in retrospect, and now getting to talk to Larry Hughes, and how open he's been and how positive he is about St. Louis. I love guys like him who are just they're always about coming back. And when you play in all the different cities he played in, and he played for all the different Hall of Famers he played with, it's honestly insane. I understand when those guys just want to be like, yeah, I'm going to go move out to I'm going to go move to a coast so I can sit on a beach. But he stayed in St. Louis, built his family here, and now obviously the second is playing at St. Louis University. And seeing Larry Hughes sit in the same row every single home game to watch the second has only increased how much of a fan I am of Larry Hughes. Watching him be a dad to another Billiken has taken him from being a guy I really loved as a St. Louisan, but that has really solidified him as why he's my favorite Billiken. The second generation aspect, I think, has been so much fun, and he's been such a champion of Larry. Whenever I tweet out something about Larry Hughes the second, there's a very good chance that senior's going to hit the retweet button. And I love that support. And again, talking to him, this guy was in a locker room in a 6-year span. He was in the same locker room with Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson, and LeBron James. So, I mean, talking to him and getting story time from him has been fascinating. So yeah, for me, it's Larry Hughes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Having him answer questions I give him was a highlight of this stupid podcast thing we do. So awesome. Well, Rock, looking forward to the Billiken season, catching up with you again at Chaffetz, and then probably seeing you around the family arena if I go to enjoy the Schadenfreude that is indoor soccer in general.
Hey, take a listen. If people haven't gotten out there, by the way, just if you don't want to even get out of the games, take a listen. I do color. The thing you'll be very excited to hear is the play-by-play guy on the Ambush games is Joey Zanaboni, who does the City games. So if you have fun listening to Joey call City games, imagine if instead of one goal every once in a while, there were like 14 goals in a game. And then imagine how awesome the goal calls get when he's on goal call number 7 of the night. And so if you love listening to Joey in City, just tune in to an Ambush game because it's like that ramped up to about 400%.
I honestly was very worried at what the St. Louis soccer community would do to Joey Zanaboni.
Me too.
I was very worried they were just going to send him, just fire him into the sun.
Yeah, and his thing, I've known Joey. There's no one in St. Louis media I've known longer than Joey Zanaboni. Me and Joey were in the exact same class from kindergarten through 8th grade in grade school. And so I know Joey very well. I've been talking sports with him since we were in 2nd grade. And so I've always known him to have that personality. And so I was excited for St. Louis to see it. I was also, like you, a little bit worried for how they were going to react. I love that the majority of fans have embraced him. And if you haven't, I'm sorry. I thought you watched sports to be entertained.
He is the American equivalent of the goal Mexican announcer.
100%. So the ambush games are a fun time. Come on out, Zach. We'd love to have you out there. And again, thanks for having me on the show. Love talking St. Louis Billikens basketball. I think it's going to be a fun season.
Yeah, we'll get you back on soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man. See ya.
See you guys later.
Thanks.
Pete, I really hope everybody enjoyed that interview. I thought it was a whole lot of fun, even if you're not, into the X's and O's, anything like that. I just thought it was a great conversation.
I think he's going to be somebody we're going to have to, ask, beg, whatever, to come on again, because once we actually get into this season and see how things are going, I'm going to want to circle back with him and kind of get his thoughts.
You want the Adult Swim?
That's right. Because like what we got now, as he said, is like 10% of like the vision of what this thing is going to be. So once we actually get into the meat of the season and see the full system in action, I think he's going to have a lot more to say. I think we're going to have a lot more to talk to him about. But as it stands, I mean, he's a fountain of knowledge.
Yes, we need more ball knowers on this
We
show.
sure do.
We had a bit of a wild evening. Was it Tuesday night? Tuesday night when we recorded, right at the end, actually, as we were going through the offers, there were actually a couple of surprise offers late that night.
There were. They came through the pipeline as we were recording, and one of them, his name threw me off right away because it's Jaden Vance, who sounds just like the VP candidate, as we mentioned last week. But he is a 6'6" small forward from Phoenix. He plays for Utah Prep, Vegas Elite AAU. He's kind of a long, athletic, versatile two-way player, efficient scorer, hard to stop going to the rim. Right now, Fordham, West Virginia, San Jose State, UIC, UTEP, and some others have offered. But SLU is now in the mix as well. And then the other one, Zach, that came through last week as we were recorded was Keaton Wagler, who's a 6'6" combo guard from Shawnee Mission Northwest High School in Kansas. He led them to an undefeated state title last season. Plays for VWBA Elite AAU. Again, another combo guard, really versatile, smart, athletic. He can handle, pass, shoot, scores on 3 levels. Great size for his position. Really good instincts on both ends. And he's just a really impressive all-around looking prospect. I really thought he looked the part on video. Other offers right now, he's got DePaul, Colorado State, Florida International, Murray State, SIUC, UIC, and then some from like the Summit, the Big West, and the Big Sky conferences as well. So I think he's just starting to kind of take off in terms of the level of program that's recruiting him.
Let's talk about Cameron Hudson out of East Lansing. East Lansing first Michigan since Jimmy Bell.
Yeah, and I was just going to say we don't really recruit Michigan a whole lot, do we? I mean, we got Jimmy Bell out of Saginaw, but he was a prep player out in Arizona at the time. And for being a Midwestern state, we just don't go up there that much. But he's a 6'5" shooting guard, as you said, from East Lansing High School. He plays for the Grand Rapids Storm AAU program. Smooth, sound scoring guard. Really consistent form on his jumper. Kind of automatic with it, which I like. He gets to the rim. Nice size and strength for his position. Rebounds well. Right now, Loyola Chicago has offered, Illinois State, Kent State, Toledo, Akron, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, Miami, Ohio, Bowling Green. What's funny about that, more than half the MAC has offered him. For whatever reason, that whole conference is all over this guy. And he's got some Horizon offers as well. But just a nice looking player. And he's another one who I think his profile in a different environment and a different time period would probably be a little bit higher because he just looks like a really solid guard.
I think it speaks to my insecurities when I ask, why do all these schools just offer these dudes? Like, there's no way they are going to commit. Like, what's the point here?
Of all the schools offering, I mean,
of offering a guy that, like, I mean, obviously the entire MAC is not going to get this guy. I mean, now I think there's probably more of a point to it being that, like, hey, look, you can offer a guy and then he might transfer later. And hey, remember, you thought about him first. You knew about him.
I think that's part of it, right? If a guy, like, because right now we talk about all of the power conferences just recruiting the portal, and kind of they'll take some commitments in the fall, they'll take some signings in the fall from high school, but not too many. They're always going to be leaving roster spots open for transfers in the spring. And what that does if you're a MAC school is you have a better opportunity to grab one of these high school players who may have jumped at an A10 or a Mountain West or whatever. So you being kind of the next level down gives you the chance to snag that guy. And even if he's not going to be a 4-year player for you, he's going to be a nice freshman in the MAC, right? So I think they kind of, for regional players, they kind of keep those relationships intact. And right now, this guy, it's not like he has Big Ten offers or anything like that. So I think they think there's a realistic competitive pool, at least for now.
A lot of talk these last couple of weeks about basketball in the continent of Africa. And while this next player isn't from South Sudan, he is originally from Senegal, Pete.
He is, yeah. Abdou Aziz Yad. I think he includes his middle name, in his profile a lot. But Abdou Yad, you might see him just called that. Yadd is his last name. He's 6'10", he's 230, and then, like you said, he's Senegalese. He's attending the Patrick School in New Jersey. Good school, good program, and playing AAU for Wildcat Select, which is an Adidas Three Stripes AAU program. He's huge, Zach. He's just got like a lot of the younger guys out of Africa, right? They're long and lean, and a lot of them are guys. They always tell you, I played soccer until I was 16, and then all of a sudden I grew 7 inches or whatever. A lot of them have that same profile, whether they're from Senegal or Nigeria or South Sudan. A lot of them, just given the global game, of football, start with that and then transition to basketball once they grow to a point that makes it undeniable. But this guy, the difference is he's just really, really big. He's got a huge frame, but he moves really well. He's got soft touch around the rim, but he can also throw down, a punishing dunk. He's surprisingly nimble for his frame. He can put it on the floor, beat defenders off the dribble, and he can also shoot the three. He's one of these guys who does not look like a high school player at all. He's just really physically developed in a lot of ways, including his coordination. Right now, he's got offers from George Mason, George Washington, Rhode Island, Seton Hall, Nebraska, Texas A&M, Arizona State, Manhattan, and Eastern Kentucky. So not a ton of offers, but some really high-level offers in there, and a lot of A10 offers and interest too, being out of New Jersey. So he's going to be one to definitely keep an eye on. And I think if he lands at the A10 level, he's going to look like a steal.
I got to know who came up with this AAU team for the next player here. I mean, what are we doing?
I wish I knew. If you ever want to,
I'm assuming that it's the nickname of a basketball player.
Yeah, so he plays AAU for Cooz Elite, Cooz. I just did a quick Google, and I don't see where the name comes from.
That's fine. It doesn't matter.
But the player is Ian Inman, Inman. He's a 6'5" shooting guard out of the Woodlands, Texas, and like we said, Cooz Elite AAU, which is a Puma program. Don't know where the name comes from, but again, if you ever want to be entertained, even the name of AAU events, like there's a tournament, I don't know if they had it this year, but called Who Want the Smoke, which is just like reading all these tweets about who performed well at Who Want the Smoke. I don't know, man. I don't know who names these things, but it's pretty funny. Anyway, he's a smooth, smart, steady, efficient shooting guard. Good passer. He's a solid defender. He closes out quickly. Really looks the part. By the way, if I'm seeing a theme so far in the offers that I've just listed off and the ones that I'm about to, it looks like they like guards with a lot of size, right? Like they're looking for guys who can play kind of a 1, 2, 3, and who are in that sort of 6'5" range. They really seem there's not really as much of a geography that they're targeting. But guards with kind of a complete skill set and good size is what they're looking at. But back to this guy, he's got offers from George Mason, UMass, West Virginia, Colorado State, San Jose State, Wichita State, Tulsa, Rice, and then a few other lower level programs. So pretty spread out for a guy coming out of Texas. A lot of Texas schools are a lot of Texas recruits tend to be recruited by kind of the same programs, but he's got a much wider map, which I thought was interesting and may have something to do with the fact that he plays for a Puma AAU team. And I don't know that that circuit has the same visibility as Nike or Adidas, but anyway, nice looking player nonetheless.
We got three here. Next up, Damone King, Luke Lechkowski, and Isaiah Medina. Lechkowski is an interesting one because there's a SLU connection there.
Yeah, and I'll start with him. He's a 6'7", 6'8", small forward, about 200 pounds, from St. Mark's High School in Dallas. He plays for Texas Impact 413 AAU, which is an Under Armour program. Stretch forward who can really shoot it, but he also gets to the rim. He rebounds, he defends. Super smart player. Both of his brothers play college ball. One is at Army and the other is at Penn. Ford's staff recruited at least one, if not both of them, but never offered. And so yeah, now they're at Army and Penn. His dad played at Wash U, played basketball there, but his mom led the volleyball team at Wash U to 3 straight national titles, and she was the D3 Player of the Year twice. So the family does have some St. Louis ties. I think they still have some connections back there. So it's good to have, a leg up in that sense that they're already comfortable with the area. Other offers he's got right now: Rice, Harvard, SIUC, Drexel, Bucknell, Boston Army, Georgia Southern, South Dakota, Sacramento State, McNeese, and then Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So SLU is kind of at the high end in terms of the programs offering him. You see some high academic schools in there, given where his brothers have gone. That's always going to kind of be in the mix there, given where his parents went. It's just a really super smart family. But he might wind up being the best of all of them when it's said and done.
And cousin of guest of the show, Justin Graham.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there's another St. Louis tie right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the second one you mentioned, Damone King. He's a 6'3" point guard from Louisville, but he's taking a prep year at Hargrave Military Academy in Virginia. Last time we've landed a Hargrave player is Tommy Liddell.
I believe so. It has to be.
It has to be. I don't think we've had one since then. Wildcat Select AAU, another guy from that program on the Adidas circuit. Versatile combo guard, probably more of a point guard, but can play the one or the two. Efficient scorer on all 3 levels. He gets to the rim. He draws a lot of fouls, and he's about a 90% free throw shooter. So that's a kind of an underrated aspect of a recruit's game, if you ask me, as someone who has that skill. Great passer and ball handler. The other offers he's got right now: Rhode Island, Illinois State, Miami, Ohio, Northern Kentucky, IUPUI, which I think is about to become IUI if it hasn't already. Jacksonville State, Fairfield, Manhattan, Eastern Kentucky, Stetson, North Alabama. So he's just starting to kind of raise the level of program that's recruiting him. I think the prep year was part of that, right? Like, I think he was kind of looking at lower level schools and then thought his stock might actually be higher. So he reclassified and has taken that extra year. So he'll be a little bit older coming into college as well. And then the third one, Zach, that you just listed off, Isaiah Medina, I'm going to guess Medina, 7'1" center from Gibbs High School in St. Petersburg, Florida, and Team Spites Elite, which is also on the Puma circuit. He's a true 7-footer. He moves really well, coordinated. He runs the floor. He's got good footwork, good hands, can shoot it out past the perimeter. He handles it well. Good communicator, and just has a really nice feel for the game. If I'm noticing a commonality among the bigs that we have been recruiting, it's guys who really seem to have a well-rounded skill set and good understanding of the game. I think Schulte is drawn to kind of your smarter bigs, right? Like the guys who aren't afraid to go out to the perimeter, pass a little bit. I think he's probably always going to be thinking of the heirs to Avila and how to backfill in behind him as we get through future generations of recruits. Other offers he's got right now: George Mason, UMass, DePaul, Tulsa, Florida International, UIC, and then he's got some actually quite a few from kind of mid and lower tier conferences as well. So SLU's getting in at a good time here. Again, Florida, not really a state we recruit a whole lot, but he's an interesting prospect. And actually, I think since I wrote this, he got 2 more offers, and I know one of them is Xavier. And our friends over at West Pine Bills pointed out the fact that Xavier seems to just be following Shirts on the recruiting trail and offering whoever he's offering. And while I think they've got more to their recruiting strategy than that. I think there absolutely is a thing in college basketball where coaches that are respected by other staffs, they're always keeping an eye on who those guys are offering. And it's easy to come in at a later hour if you're Xavier and have a bigger NIL budget and try and swoop in. So kind of interesting to keep an eye on, as they seem to be offering a lot of the guys we offer like 3 days later.
The last two on the list here are Jordan Tillery and Jalen Cross.
Jordan Tillery's a 6'5" guard, again, on theme, from IMG Academy. So he actually graduated from Dr. Phillips in Orlando and committed to Georgia Southern, but then he backed out of his LOI. He reclassified, and he's heading to IMG. He's versatile, tough player, athletic. He can play the 1 through the 3 on offense. He can guard the 1 through the 3 on defense. Got a point guard skill set. He's got deep range on his shot. Nice looking player. I think he rightly assumed that his stock would be higher if he waited another year. So I think it was, kind of a smart move on his part. Other offers right now, he's got VCU, Duquesne, George Mason, George Washington, Seton Hall, Arizona State, Mercer, Towson, Hampton, and then he's got about 6 or 7 others from smaller conferences, mostly in the Southeast. So you can see already that, going from Georgia Southern to the schools I just rattled off that have offered since he reclassified, it seems like he's absolutely made the right move. And then the last one, Zach, just came in today. Jalen Cross is a 6'4" guard out of Greensboro, North Carolina, Caldwell Academy and Team CP3 AAU, which is a Nike EYBL program. He's a nice, complete prospect, really productive, efficient, 3-level scorer. He creates for himself and his teammates. Very athletic. He's a lockdown defender. Just has a lot of attributes you like to see in somebody this age. Other offers right now: Richmond, Tennessee, Texas A&M, LSU, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Wake Forest, Charlotte, East Carolina, Charleston, few others from lower conferences. So he's like a 4-star level kid in a lot of rankings. So we're definitely jumping in this one a little bit late. I don't know. I don't always know what the thought is there, that if we can come in and kind of be competitive or what they think, but he's certainly a guy who's got a lot of options, ACC, SEC, some bigger tiers. But we'll see how this one develops.
Oh, Pete, let's talk salsa. I don't have a good transition. Let's just talk salsa. Let's talk pickles. Let's talk the box you're going to order that we still need to get everyone's input on.
I think I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'm going to make a note to myself. I'm going to do it tomorrow and start tweeting out, I think, polls on Twitter X. So as we release this episode, so I guess I should be saying today, look at our Twitter feed, and I'm going to be putting polls out and vote for what you want me to put in this box that I'm going to order and have shipped to myself. We'll do it that way, because I'm coming down, Zach, to the end of a Cantina style jar. And I got to say, I love the Cantina style. Love it, love it, love it. I love the texture of it. It's a little bit smoother. It's a little bit easier, to get into a taco, for example. So I really love the Cantina style, and I blow through it so fast. So I'm definitely going to need some more of that, no matter what the voters tell me I'm going to take home. But make your own box, get your own Cantina style as well. 2meninthegarden.com, $9.99 nationwide shipping, or pick it up in Schnucks, Straub's, any local St. Louis grocery retailer.
Pete, we got some surprising news this past week regarding women's basketball and the roster. Kind of a signing out of nowhere.
Yeah, we knew they had at least one spot to give. We thought 2, but we'll get to that in a minute. The new signing, Zach, is Rita Nazario. She's a point guard from Portugal who has played for the U16 and U18 national teams. She plays for CRC Quinta dos Lombos, which finished 3rd in the U18 national Final Four in Portugal. She led the club to 1st and 2nd place finishes in the prior 2 seasons. And then on the senior level, she's competed for the U22 national championship. She's playing in the women's Betclic Portuguese league with Quinta dos Lombos. She was a member of the Portuguese Basketball Federation Super Cup Championship team, and she says she wants to study mechanical engineering at SLU. She loved the program the first time the coaches made contact with her. So, Zach, I don't know how they found her. I don't know how the recruitment went other than they seem to really hit it off, but it seems like she's going to be a good fit.
Yeah, Tillett said, as we finalized this year's roster, we thought it was important to add depth. Rita brings so much of what we are looking for in players. She celebrates her teammates' successes in a big, joyful way. She plays with smarts, has a flair about her game. She accesses high-level basketball reads and has an obvious love of the game. The more we got to know her, the more we knew she would add to our team-first culture.
Yeah, so like I said before, when we went through the roster, we added her, and I think that's 14, right? But then the women's program tweeted out that the roster is complete with this signing. So kind of like with the graphic and the welcome and all of that, they said our 2024-2025 roster is complete. So we had tweeted out the day before that we thought there was one more scholarship to give, and that even though this one felt like a surprise, we should be ready for one more surprise. But I guess not, Zach. I think this is probably going to be it for them. And we've got our roster for the upcoming season.
Yes. And Kyla McMakin appears to be on a roster for this upcoming season. By the way, I saw that movie on Disney Plus about the woman who swam the English Channel, first woman to do it. So like when I see the English Channel here, I automatically, by the way, decent movie, not important. She signed with St. Thomas Baskets Le Havre.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Le Havre.
Le
if I had to
Havre,
guess.
a French LF2 team.
Yeah, so the town of Le Havre is on the north coast of France, like you said, across the channel from Portsmouth, England. When I went searching for information about this team, I couldn't really find much at all. The French Women's League has promotion and relegation, and they aren't listed in the first or second tiers. SLU's article said LF2. I mostly see NF2 as the second division, but the club isn't listed there, so I wonder if they're kind of taking a spot from a relegated team. Like, I don't know what the third or like lower tiers look like, or if you can buy your way in, but they do have teams get relegated out of it. So it seems like they might be new to it this season. In terms of what I can find, just really not much information about them at all. But I am seeing McMakin's name on FIBA and Eurobasket already listed as one of their players.
It's weird because it looks like they played Pro A in tier 1 from 09 to 16. And then 2016-17, they finished 7th in Pro B. And then their Wikipedia, unless this is the men. Doesn't matter.
Okay, that's the men. Yeah. So there just really isn't much out there at all on what the women have done historically. But nonetheless, look, I mean, she's playing on the coast of France, maybe the colder, rainier coast of France, but nonetheless, a really cool spot. And it's exciting for her to start her pro career, and hopefully she can make some noise over there.
Absolutely. On the men's soccer side, before we finish with women's basketball, they posted out a tweet looking for a support service coordinator. The women's basketball team's looking for a video and analytics coordinator. It's not a recruiting assistant position, but it is an on-court coaching opportunity. I assume this is a new position they were afforded this year.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not aware of them having had the position in the past, unless I'm just forgetting or missing it. But yeah, it should be. It's a new position. They're looking for I think 2 years of experience. Well, I'm looking now, Zach. It says Calvin Finley is the video coordinator. So yeah, I guess maybe they're just building out that role a little bit more or something like that. But yeah, anyway, look at the listing if you know anybody who might fit the role, and hopefully they find somebody good for it.
Let's recap the U.S. Olympic men and, of course, Patrick Schulte. We talked a little bit about it with Matt Rocchio, but let's kind of go through the goals in these ones. Go ahead and take game one.
Yeah, game one was the hardest one for him, unfortunately. France 3, USA 0. It was 0-0 at halftime. The U.S. team were playing pretty well, holding up holding their own pretty well against some young French players who are
and
much
a
more expensive.
30-year-old Lacazette.
Much older Lacazette, but some of those younger French players are actually pretty expensive transfers in their own right. The first goal was a long, low bouncer from Lacazette, and Schulte kind of reacted late. He may have thought it was going to be deflected because it kind of split two defenders, but he may have also been screened. I couldn't really tell on the replays, but I bet he'd really like another crack at that one because there wasn't a whole lot on that shot and it got by him. In terms of the second one, just an extremely well-placed shot that it was made all the more difficult because it took a really light graze off of like a twisting U.S. defender. He had his arm at his side and it just kind of clipped it, and that gave it a little more arc on, around, and it just barely curled around Schulte and into the far corner of the net. It's probably one he would have gotten to without that little deflection. But it was well timed and well placed, and just that little bit of extra luck got it in there. The third was a header off a really poorly defended corner. Schulte was left helpless on that one. Not his fault. Nothing he could do there. Unfortunately, the U.S. hit the crossbar early in the second half and hit the post on a header that would have tied it in the 65th minute. So they had a couple opportunities really close to being a much different game. But I think aside from that first one, Schulte was pretty solid in it nonetheless.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, I think this was probably the only one where Schulte would have anything to really write home about as far as regrets.
Yeah, I think so.
The second game, of course, much better for the United States. It resulted in a 4-1 USA win over New Zealand. The All Whites, I believe is what they're called. A much better performance, as I mentioned. Schulte had a great save on a long shot in the 22nd minute. He had another great reaction save on a deflection. None of the U.S. goals were pretty, but they were creating a ton of opportunities and probably could add a couple more. The one goal New Zealand wound up with came late in the game on a bit of a defensive breakdown. A defender overplayed the ball and left two American defenders next to each other with a New Zealand player alone behind them. Schulte was in the middle of the frame and couldn't really do anything about it. And then Pete, Schulte finally got his clean sheet in game 3.
Yeah, he sure did, and he really didn't have a whole lot to do in it. But he did make one huge save in stoppage time to preserve the clean sheet. Really a kind of a point blank reaction save. Really impressive on that one. And it was kind of a statement save, right? He's got the clean sheet going, does that, and I think that's the kind of high you love to come out of a game on, right? Like making that play, watching the last couple minutes tick away, and then you officially get out of the group stage with that win. So Schulte is definitely, if I had to pick the order of how these games went, this is probably the order I would have picked, right? Like struggle a little bit in the beginning and then keep getting better and end on a high note like that. So I think the U.S. is in a good spot coming into the knockout stage, the quarterfinals, and hopefully we see some more heroics from Schulte and net, and maybe we can get to the semifinals.
Yeah, they'll have to get past the Moroccan Olympic team. I don't know much about Morocco, but was that where they invaded the pitch? Was that Morocco, Argentina?
I don't recall.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, but again, this is their U23 team.
Yes,
for the most part too. Like they're pretty competitive in the
yes. It was them who
okay
versus Argentina in the very opening game of the tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so back here in St. Louis, though, Simon Betcher made his St. Louis City debut on Saturday in a 2-1 win over FC Dallas in the Leagues Cup. He was in the starting lineup. Early in the second half, he was taken down in the box, and City was awarded a PK. Marcel Hartl converted in a game that was also his debut. City had 3 players debuting in the starting lineup, with Cedric Toikert being the third. Betcher was subbed off in the 77th minute for Jose Kojima. John Klein came in in the 68th minute, so we didn't get to see much of Shake and Bake back together. But yeah, feels like Betcher was a huge lift for this team.
He really was. I mean, like it just feels like they're getting kind of a refresh right now, right? And he's part of that. And we talked to Rocchio about that a little bit. So it's good to see him involved in that. And if he's kind of going to be the super sub up top, that's fine. I think that's a good role for him to transition into this program for sure. But our friends over at Ball Watching tweeted, when a competitive hunger meets talent, you've got a serious player on your hands. And that's what I'm seeing in Simon Betcher tonight, just like he was at SLU. I'm stoked to see him continue to get minutes with the quality around him. So good start for our guy Simon.
Oh yeah. I love it. I love having Betcher back in St. Louis. I love seeing Johnny Klein get minutes.
Yep.
But yeah, news out of the baseball program, two big stories. One, which we kind of introduced into the Billiken Twitterverse, which we've talked about a lot today. Incoming transfer, Pete. It's the son of Mark McGwire, and it's not the one you saw as the bat boy back in '98. It's a younger son.
You know, and that's immediately where my mind went.
Yes.
I was like, oh, he's all grown up.
It's Matt. It's Matt McGwire, who was definitely like 12 in 1998. He was older than me in 98.
Yeah, and that's what I was struggling with, Zach, is because, like, to me, in my mind, he's such a little kid, Matt McGwire, the bat boy, you know, like he's just a perpetual little kid. And then I realized he's 4 years younger than me, right? So like he's like Tim Ream's class, basically. Like that's the age that Mark McGwire's eldest son is. So he's like double the age of someone who would be coming to play baseball. But we signed Max McGwire, who's one of his two sons from his second marriage. He's a transfer from San Diego, started his collegiate career at Oklahoma. He didn't play much there, but they went to the College World Series and finished second. So good experience for him there. And then he sat out 2023 due to Tommy John surgery, played very little this past season. But he's crushing it this season in summer ball with the Wisconsin Rapids Rafters of the Northwoods League. As our friend Oki Billiken reminds us, Patrick Closey also only had a few at-bats at Purdue at a bigger conference team before coming to SLU and tearing it up. So if he's healthy and really feeling good at the plate in summer league, you never know. We might have kind of gotten a steal on our hands here, in addition to the fun story of having a McGwire back in St. Louis.
I feel like I got to hit the NIL store for the McGwire Billiken jersey.
There's some good potential there for sure.
Yes. Is he going to wear it? Is he going to wear the number 25?
I hope so.
Are we calling it?
It's not a retired number in our fair city, so I think it's out there if he wants it.
Are you ready? You ready to talk about some lights, Pete?
We might as well.
Stu Durando on Monday tweeted out that SLU baseball coach Darren Hendrickson said the campus stadium will get new lights in time for the 2025 season. The current lights, if you want to call them that, they're inoperable, 30 years old. He said the current lights are 30 years old. A return to some night games would be a good change for the program. The Billikens, if you missed it last, like I guess in the spring, the lights didn't work, and SLU only scheduled day games.
Yeah. Like Wrigley Field before 1987.
Can you imagine a college Division I baseball game in 2024 being ended because of darkness? This is what they did in Legend of Bagger Vance.
Yeah.
In the greatest game ever played. Movies both set before World War I. Or no, one was set after World War I, one was set before. Anyway, like, what are we doing? This isn't an upgrade. This isn't some investment in the baseball program. This is stadium maintenance. Like, I find it hilarious that we're announcing maintenance plans.
Yeah,
replacing the infield, replacing the lights, and then we've got the field hockey field, which we know absolutely nothing about.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the equivalent for Chaffetz Arena, right? Like
New floor?
what
What?
yeah,
No, because the new floor would come with like a new paint and new whole
yeah.
big thing, a new design. People would get excited about the design.
Like
The
we have seat
seats.
backs for season
Yeah.
ticket holders.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's like
yeah.
the kind of thing where you're like shocked that it wasn't this way
Yes.
already, right? Like
Yes.
yeah, is it an upgrade technically? Yes, because there was nothing there
They're
before. So
LED lights as opposed to halogen lights.
yeah, so
I
sure,
think I got that right.
it's technically an upgrade, but it's not supposed to be an upgrade. You know, you're
Right.
supposed to have lights, and there's no good reason not to, right? Like my high school, the where the soccer field was on campus backs up to like $1 million plus houses, right, in a expensive neighborhood, and so there was always a battle about getting lights on the soccer field because it was such a good setting for soccer, but the rich neighbors, didn't want the soccer lights and at nighttime. So there was a real reason for actually not having lights there for a long time. SLU, the baseball field, is not in a spot where the lights would be an issue for any reason
Yeah.
whatsoever.
And it's a safety issue for those visiting basketball games.
Sure.
They do a great job to light up the pathways.
Yeah, it can be pretty dark, especially in the dead of winter between the garage and the stadium or the arena. So yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where you shake your head and go, well, finally, you know, or
Yeah.
like now, hopefully we can get some momentum into other upgrades in
Yeah.
that baseball complex.
Yeah, and to remind people that as I did on Twitter, that the baseball, like the bleachers, are still inaccessible to those in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
So that's crazy to me. Like at that point, that's to me, like you look at everything else and you can say, sure, the press box, what do we need a press box for? What do we need, seating, better seating for? Nobody goes to the games. When you talk about freaking ADA accessibility and again, like I replied to West Pine Bills, we have a professor that you threw a huge party for because she's going to the Paralympic Games to compete and show the world what people with physical limitations can do. And she can't even go to a SLU. Like if you wanted to throw out the first pitch at a SLU baseball game, she couldn't stay for the game to watch it.
Right.
Are you kidding me? Anyway, but yeah, so you look at, I mean, the lights beyond just being like a scheduling thing. You know, in the dead of or the fall, that early spring, that winter, that late winter, obviously you're going to want to play games in the day. You're going to try to get that sun, but you get into those late spring games, that grind of the conference season, and you're playing all day games in spring days that can get up pretty high. So I mean, it's nice. Give your team a break and let them play a night game when it's a little bit cooler.
For sure. Yeah, it gives them a lot of flexibility too. We know as well as anyone in the A10 that travel can be difficult. And so to have a longer portion of the day available for games is important, right? Like it just gives them more flexibility in that way as well. Thinking about the teams that have to come in and out of St. Louis. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons that this needed to happen, and it's about time.
Pete, run us down a little women's soccer news before we get out of here.
Yeah, so they named Mary Niehaus director of operations. She was a goalkeeper at SLU from 2014 to 2019, a three-time all-conference player. She's the program's all-time leader still in goals against average and number 3 in a lot of other career stats like wins, shutouts, minutes. So really like a top 3 all-time goalie. Katie Shields called her instrumental in building the foundation of the program's current championship culture. When you look at Shields' tenure, Niehaus was really the goalie for kind of the first half of it, call it more or less, right? She's a St. Louis area native as well. She's from St. Charles. She went to Narings Hall for high school, and yeah, she's, they like to keep it in house, right? Bree Halverson's back, Niehaus is back. Those are two, as Shields said, like really big culture fits for this program, and the kind of people you want there for that continuity and just building that for future generations of SLU women's soccer players. So really cool to get her back there. We know Shields is also biased towards goalies as well. So got to get that as part of it as well. So very cool. Welcome back, and really, really excited for fall to come around and this team to start playing. I know they're practicing again as of this week, by the way, Zach. So that's exciting. We're going to see these soccer teams in action very, very soon.
Going for 7.
They're going to be very, very good. Yeah, going for 7 straight.
What's interesting is that we've never seen anything quite like the way Shields is building that program staff through alumni. Yeah. Because I don't think we've ever really had the continuity or the continuous head coaching position, at least not in the last, 25 years to 30 years. Right.
I think this will be year 11 for her, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah.
But I mean, but you also, not only do you have to, be there a long time, you also have to have success. If you don't have success, you don't have cultural fits. You can't necessarily bring them back. You're searching for outside. So, I mean, this is uncharted waters, I feel like, for a SLU athletics program, as far as kind of just continuing for, as long as I don't know, longevity's sake.
Right. Yeah, agree completely. And they have a chance to be, they build on it every year, right? Like that success has been not just like, oh, they've hit a plateau or something like that. Like they keep building every year on what they're accomplishing, and they have a chance to be awesome this year. So to have people like this in your locker room is just crucial, and excited to see where the program goes this year and beyond that, for sure.
That's going to do it for us on this episode. Thank you again so much for listening. Thank you to Matt Rocchio. Again, can't thank everybody enough. We're getting so close to a new season. Again, thank you to Two Men in a Garden, which I got to get with Joel over at Two Men and talk about next season. Talk some business. But yeah, thank you all for listening. Go Bills.
Go Bills.